Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. When one looks at history, we see that so many of the big mistakes of humanity, all the tragedies and the wars and the conflicts, so many of them stemmed from moments when groups or crowds were used in their grievances and lost their control and were overpowered by clever, manipulative leaders. And it often came in very fragile moments. And our parsha this morning is such a story. Korach and his followers start a rebellion against Moses and Aaron. They say, "We are all holy. Why do you raise yourselves above the congregation?" And we can maybe understand why Korach, as mentioned earlier, may have had a receptive audience among the 250 men of repute, Anshe Shem, that he gathered with him, and the Kahal Yisrael, and the whole congregation of Israel. Because it came right after Shlach Lecha, our episode last week, when the spies were on the very edge of the promised land, on the edge of fulfilling all their dreams. And then they were told that they could not enter that land. They could not enter the land of their forefathers, of Abraham, of Isaac, of Jacob, of Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah. And the people, after hearing they would have to spend 40 years in the wilderness, realizing their mistake, that they didn't think they were courageous enough to conquer it, suddenly tried to storm the land, but God was not with them and they were again defeated. We can imagine how they felt. They had expected to be at the end of their travels, to be entering the promised land. And now Moses was telling them they were heading back into the wilderness. Why had they ever left Egypt? And in stepped in a very clever leader, Korach, and two others, Datan and Aviram. And Korach was from a very prominent Levite family. He had an important position. According to Midrash, he was even one of those who carried the Holy Ark. And they gathered, as the Torah says, important men, Anshe Shem. Maybe the Torah is being ironic in saying that. Is that what Korach promised them? I'm going to make you a person of importance if you join. But Korach had a complaint that he spread and knew how to embed among all the people. You have gone too far, Moses and Aaron. Kulam kedoshim, everyone is holy. Why do you raise yourself above the congregation? And he took advantage of that discontent of the people and the fact that over the years, certain groups have become ascendant in the society that Moses and Aaron were building. We can imagine if they had been headed to the promised land at that moment, none of those grievances would have gone anywhere or been effective. But where they were now in mourning and shock, they were simply not thinking, and all they knew is that everything had not gone as had been planned. And perhaps even more, Korach and his party were driving at a deeper discontent that was there behind the surface. How difficult and challenging it was to live up to all of the expectations that Moses and Aaron had for them, to the life of Torah that they were being taught. And now, without the promise of entering their promised land, the whole package seemed suspect. And so Korach's rebellion was very opportune. It was coming at the right time, the right moment. And yet we cannot only blame Korach either. The people also had a part to play, because they were blaming the wrong leaders. It was not Moses and Aaron or God who had led them to their demise. It was the scouts who had given the bad report, who had lacked the courage. They had been sent as chieftains, as princes, but they'd been unable to see how good the land was. And they're the ones who had spread the bad report. And so in their people's mourning at the situation, they turned against the wrong leaders. Moses had tried to save them. Aaron had tried to save them. What Korach did was to twist the truth. And as Rashi says, yes, they were all holy. Every single one of them had been on Israel, and they were playing on that deeper truth that we were all made in the image of God. It was a true statement, Kulam Kedoshim. But the people were being misled. Moses had been appointed by God. Aaron had been appointed by God. That's why Moses says, what did Aaron have to do with all of this, Korach? It was God who appointed Aaron the high priest. In taking stock of the mind of the people, what Korach did is what leaders have done throughout history. He took a little truth and manipulated it, maybe it polled well. And it was really an attack by Korach on Moses' leadership, an attack on its foundation that God communicated to Moses to guide the people. And it could have led to civil war, could have led to a splitting of the Jewish people, the end of the whole experiment. So Moses' response to all of this was not to argue, I am more holy than you are, or he's more holy. But he got to the root of the matter. It was an attack on leadership. And so he challenged Korach, let us see who is chosen by God. Let us see what this is all about. When Korach refuses the challenge and says, no, we should just all go back to Egypt, he exposes a half-truth. It was never about who was holy and who was not. Korach wanted to lead the people himself back to Egypt. And the grievance of we are all holy was just to hoodwink the people to think it was about everybody being holy. But really it was his personal desire to lead, to be powerful, to have authority. And so what does the episode teach us? It teaches us about such fraught moments and where they can lead us. How when people have grievances, it can blind them from seeing the truth, it makes them vulnerable to manipulation and following paths that will only lead to trouble. And there have been leaders all throughout time who try to manipulate people's grievances for their own motivation. And there's other such moments in the Torah that describes them clearly. It teaches us how easily our lower emotions are awoken to disastrous effect, how we toss aside clarity and sensibility and reason because of powerful emotions, and how leaders take advantage of the weakness of people in such moments to create rebellions and revolutions, making them feel heard. That people often lack the common sense to see how they got into the situation. And so in the end, the earth swallows up Korach and his false claims. And it is our hope too, the freedom and truth resound, to clear all hearts and minds, and take us together on the path that will lead all of us to the promised lands that we are all dreaming of. Shabbat Shalom.